I'm going to talk about this power and how we get it from light, earth, water, air, and ether. And this last sentence, interacting with these elements as an aspect of self allows ourselves to expand our concept of self. I probably could have reworded that better, but the air is us, right? But the air isn't just in us, it's external to us. It's everywhere. Same thing with light, same thing with earth, same thing with water, same thing with ether. And it's in the plants, it's in everybody else. And so for me, the elements also gives me a diagram of which to explore concepts like ascension, this unity consciousness that's enveloping us all. So we're going to start with light. Now, light in school, what I was taught is that fire is what is burning up in the sky, producing light for us, right? And so fire was actually used as light before electricity. So these are chandeliers. So if you guys are familiar with, this is kind of a chandelier, but if you're familiar with like a classical chandelier shape, that's to hold candles. And then we would light them on fire, and that's before electricity, how auditoriums, theaters would be lit up. So for me, I don't use fire as the element because it's really about light. Because I don't really think that we can define fire as, or we can define light as fire. Like the sun is burning a bunch of elements, right? Because if we look at what fire is, so if we take like a tree, what a tree is doing is it's taking air, it's carbon dioxide. You guys have heard this, right? Trees and plants breathe in carbon dioxide. So that's carbon, O2, and oxygen. What a tree does is it breaks, through photosynthesis, it breaks the carbon and oxygen apart, and it releases the oxygen out. Because it gets oxygen to make the cellulose from the ground, gets it from the water. So it's taking H2O from the ground. So we got carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, which is cellulose, which is the tree. Carbohydrate also is made from carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. So that's what fire is. When we light it on fire, so when we light the carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen on fire, what we have is heat is produced, but more importantly, light is produced, because in the wood is sunlight. So light gets released, that's what we know of as fire. Carbon dioxide, the process basically reverses. The fire breathes in oxygen and releases carbon dioxide. Hydrogen also goes up as well. And so fire is light. Light is not exactly fire. So then that begs the question is, what is light? Right? So there's many ways to think about the sun, which is what I'm saying is the source of light. But no matter how you think about it, light is transmitting information. So what I mean by that is we get told to wake up by the sun, right? You guys know this. You're sleeping, and then your body gets told to wake up by the sun. Same thing with going to sleep. Your body gets told to go to sleep by waking, but when the sun goes down. We also know that plants respond differently to different light spectrums. Blue light makes the plants grow tall. Red light makes the plants grow wide. That's simplistic terms. It's a little bit more complex than that. But simply speaking, the animals also mate during different times of the year based on the sunlight. Trees fruit based on light and other information from the weather. So I had to ask myself, okay, if light is powerful and is doing all this stuff, how am I getting light in my body that I can turn it into power? Okay? And so I looked at when the sperm enters the egg, and then from that process all the way to we're a human being, outside with our shirt off or very little clothes in the sun. How does this light get into our body? So this is, I've got a little demonstration. This is essentially the ectoderm, mesoderm, endoderm turning into our body. So when the sperm enters the egg and then there's cell duplication, all of the cells are the same. And then eventually they turn into an eyeball, a muscle, a hair cell, a bone cell. And it does that in processes. So if you guys remember from probably ninth grade, there was these germ layers: ectoderm, mesoderm, endoderm. The mesoderm, I remember that because meso, muscle. Turns into bones and muscle. Endo turns into your organs. And ecto turns into your brain and your skin. Brain and skin. So why is it that the brain and skin are of the same cellular origin? So this is what happens. So we've got, I'll use this as the mesoderm. We've got cells that need to separate into 3 different types of cells that then turn into all of the different parts of your body. So we've got the mesoderm forms, and then we have the endoderm, which is going to be your organs, and in the middle, we have, on top, we have the ectoderm. So this is your brain. When this, again, this is very simple. I'm using towels. It's a little bit more complex, but you'll start to see what I'm doing with the towels here. When this starts to turn into a sphere, what ends up happening is the brain gets trapped, right? What was on the outside? Muscles and bones. On the inside was the organs, your digestive system. The brain gets trapped, and then there's 2 little strands, kind of, but 3-dimensional, whatever you would call that. 3 little planes that come out, and then 2 little planes that come out, and they wrap the whole cell. And that ends up being your skin and your hair. So your skin and your hair are made up of the same fundamental cells as your brain. Okay, we got that? So that's important because melanin is in our skin, our hairs, and our eyes. There's many different types of melanin, but 2 main types: eumelanin and pheomelanin. So eumelanin, do I have that backwards? No. Eumelanin is dark, and pheomelanin, face, I remember that because lips, it's like red. All right, so your nipples, your pigments like that are the pheomelanin. Eumelanin is dark. There's also neuromelanin, okay? So we get taught what in school? What do you guys know about melanin from what they teach you in school? That it blocks the sun, right? It stops us from getting sunburn, it blocks the sun. So this is where I started rethinking everything. Because if you go outside and you touch a black stone, it's hot because it's holding light. If you touch a white stone or a white crystal, it's literally like ice. It's cold. So if melanin is made to protect us from the sun, then it wouldn't be, number 1, inside of our body as neuromelanin, and it also wouldn't be dark. We would produce a sheen to reflect the light back out. So blackness, darkness, which melan means etymologically darkness. I think that might be a slide next. Mela means dark or black. And so it's holding on to light. That's what all of this is. A lot of us, we're used to clothes, we're used to shoes, we're used to protecting ourselves from the elements, right? Cars, houses. So the way that we think about our skin from school, that's programming us from just how we live, is that the skin is a protective barrier from the elements. It is not. We are nature. We are earthlings. The skin is interacting with the elements. It's transmitting information. It's communicating around you. Melanin is also used in technology. The difference between an electron and a photon, there's one main difference. An electron has mass, a photon doesn't have mass. Besides that, they act very similar. So the actual science that comes out to mainstream is what serves whoever is in control of the media, whoever is in control of the scientific institutions. And so my father, who's an electrician, tells me electricity doesn't actually travel, that it's just being sort of excited along. And same thing with photons. Photons operate similarly, but that's not really what this talk is about. I'm just saying that melanin is being used in technology to transmit electricity. So the neuromelanin in our body, the melanin in our skin, probably, if you can put the dots together, are transmitting either electricity or photons. Got it? So this is from a book called Light, Medicine of the Future. It's written by Dr. Jacob Lieberman. He is an eye doctor. And he explains in this picture how when any light comes into your eye, it separates itself off into two cords. And those cords, one goes to your visual cortex, and then one comes in and it goes hypothalamus, pituitary, pineal gland. So the hypothalamus is essentially signaling whether we're in parasympathetic or sympathetic nervous system, which is rest or digest or fight or flight. And that's essentially telling us things like, do we get up, right? And it's also regulating fluid, it's regulating emotions, our reproductive system. Our pituitary gland is essentially all of our hormones. So our pituitary gland is our hormone master. So remember, light is informing these glands that then inform your entire body. It eventually finds its way to the pineal gland. And I've got a bunch of stuff here: body temperature, blood pressure, growth, tumor growth, immune system, emotions, energy. There's a lot of stuff, but it's essentially your entire existence of life is determined by these glands and some others. But it's because of the light. The light is informing these glands on what to do in your body. The pineal gland is producing melatonin, which also is a combination of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and a little bit of nitrogen. Melatonin etymologically comes from melanin and tone, which means tonic. Melanin, tonic. If you look it up, it's actually going to say melanin comes from melanin and serotonin, but serotonin comes from serum tonic, is what serotonin means. Serotonin is actually what the body uses to make melatonin. However, if we do the math here, melanin, dark, blackness, holder of light, is collecting light. That's why it's on the outside of our body. That's why the body produces more of it the more that we're out in the sun. Just like we produce more muscles, the more stuff we lift up, we produce more melanin the more we're out in the sun. We don't produce more melanin to block us from the sun. We produce more melanin because we're out in the sun, so the body's going to spend resources to produce more dark stuff. That dark stuff is carrying light through the eyeballs, through the skin, through the hair, into the body, informing the body, into the pineal gland, which then produces melanin tonic. Okay? Melanin tonic is what? It's a tonic made of light. Melanin tonic made of light. Then what happens when we dream, when melatonin is being produced? Our body's getting recalibrated, all adjusted to the light. Okay? So you spend all day outside, you are in a different melanin tonic than if you spend all day inside. And once again, I want to remind you how I got into this. I wasn't working out. I wasn't touching a barbell for years. I go to a fitness competition where we have to lift 300 pounds up to here regularly, walk on our hands, do pirouettes on our hands, jump onto podiums like this, gymnastics, and I'm able to compete at a world-class level. We're living in basically an anti-sun civilization, right? So we have technology that actually plugs into nature because we are nature. So next is Earth. So back to us being earthlings and part of nature. Our feet, for instance, have 1,300 nerve endings per square inch. This is the biggest amount of nerve endings in anything of that size in our body. It's informing our body just as well based on what we're stepping on. If you guys start being outside for a long time, you're going to start feeling the earth. Like you're going to taste it. You'll build a sensation in the bottom of your feet. 2,500 sweat glands on the sole of the foot, right? So I played hockey my whole life for 20 years, and I remember in the locker rooms, everyone takes off their shoes, and there's little footprints that are wet, they're moist on the black rubber that's in hockey locker rooms because we wear skates, which are essentially razor blades. So we walk on rubber. And I remember distinctly everyone's feet sweat. And you guys right now, if you take off your shoes, you feel the bottom of your feet. It's not necessarily because they're covered, because we also wear clothes. We sweat a little bit, but the sweat glands on the sole of the foot is to increase conductivity with the earth. The technology that we are, it's right there. Okay, it's right there. And what does earthing do? And I would recommend everybody either watch the movie called, I think it's called The Earthing Movie, or read the book called The Earthing Book. It's by Clint Ober, and I mention this because this entire, quote, science was discovered in 1998. So when I said earlier that scientists are kind of all arguing, plus they're just figuring stuff out. So we are earthing our technology inside of our houses by having that third, you know, the two plugs, and then there's that third one, that's a grounding cable. That is a copper wire that goes outside into the earth. And that's to protect our electronics. Our body works the same way. That ground that we has works to protect us from electromagnetic frequencies of even just our sun and the cosmic rays that are showering down on us, but then especially the EMF that is man-made technology. It does it to a degree, even though the EMF stuff is very, very strong. So there's things you guys have probably heard of free radicals as being bad, but free radicals do things in our body. It's essentially helping our body by stealing electrons from pathogens and things that shouldn't be there. Even dead, damaged, broken cells. It's disintegrating things in our body to keep your body healthy. We're supposed to be collecting electrons, though, from the earth that go and they neutralize the free radicals. That's how the body operates. But when we take ourselves out of the earth, then that process doesn't happen. So we've got a bunch of free radicals going around in your body, stealing electrons from now your healthy cells, which then now are missing an electron, and then it kind of turns into a snowball effect. Earthing has a lot of anti-inflammatory properties as well, and inflammation can be attributed to many diseases. Many diseases can be attributed to inflammation. So I've got a whole slide here about how that works. Not going to go over all of them. So earthing, again, lots of impacts. Some things that helped me is that there's studies that prove that earthing reduces DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness. So I mentioned not working out for 10 months. I also could do a CrossFit qualifying workout, be top in the world, and the next day be fine. So that's an extreme advantage in sports. There's also links to weight gain and obesity. There's a study done on rats where there is a 2% increase in weight a year in ungrounded rats. So earthing is going to help your body process the electrical environment better. And back to the sun, right? So we are a conduit of light, and being grounded into the earth helps you stabilize that light. So the questions I get asked are, what surfaces conduct, right? Because besides just going outside, sometimes we have a question because we might have a backyard or something that have sidewalk has cement, or a backyard could have cement, or it could have tiles, or it could have a wood deck. And so the question is like, what actually earths us? And so earthy soil, obviously. So when it comes to brick and concrete, I always used to give the answer of maybe. I think the best thing to do is test it with a device that electricians use to test ground. But the answer with concrete and brick is maybe. So sidewalks, for instance. If you're walking on a new sidewalk that looks pristine, there's no cracks, There's no little grass growing up. It's probably done in a way that they put plastic underneath it, which is going to stop the earthing. So this is important for people with dogs, because you're like, I'm going to walk my dog and earth at the same time. Can I walk on the sidewalk? If the sidewalks that you're walking on look cracked and there's grass growing up in between the sidewalk, then it's likely done in a cheap manner without plastic, because that grass comes. So that's an easy way to tell whether concrete is grounded. If you go into lakes, rivers, oceans, you're earthed. Anything painted is not going to be earthed. Also, trees, directly earthed vegetation. So even just hands on a tree, you're earthed. What I would recommend is 30 to 45 minutes, but even going out for 1 second brings that in, and it starts to neutralize a lot of your body, but it does bring in the ions, because electrons travel at the speed of light. And I put it in quotes because of what I was saying earlier, that maybe light doesn't travel. So these do not conduct. Plastics, vinyl materials, shoes, indoor plants or indoor trees, they need to actually be into the earth. Earthing something, has anyone here heard of electroculture in regards to gardening? So that's an interesting concept to me, which I would like to add on to this discussion, which I'm currently looking into, because you have a plant in a garden that's grounded, yet if you put a spirally piece of copper next to it, it's going to allow the plant to grow bigger, taller, quicker, more fruit, more vegetables. So there's something happening where you can even increase the earth vegetation by increasing the antenna effect from what? Right? Is it the light? Is it ether? That's all new relatively as well. So there's also earthing footwear, which I recommend, earthing pads that you can plug into the walls at your house, EMF blockers and harmonizers. I definitely recommend them. The earth laughs and flowers. So once you actually are attuned with things like light and earth, you start to feel it. I mentioned tasting it earlier. As we start being okay with dirt in our toenails, dirt in our fingernails, we start being okay with sweating a little bit because we're out in the sun. We start being okay with the bottoms of our pants maybe coming frayed or dirty because we're walking outside. What a sunspot is basically an indication that you're living. Or in other words, getting older, right? So a sunspot is melanin in a genetically northern hemisphere, northern hemisphere, because 90% of the earth is living, of the population is living in the northern hemisphere, but very pale-skinned people, they also produce melanin, but not at the amount that highly melanated individuals do. So highly melanated individuals, their melanin coats their body nice and evenly. Paler, heritaged people, the melanin have determined the best way to grab that light is to clump together. So when you're outside, your body's going to produce a sunspot or a freckle. That's just a clumping of melanin to make it more efficient to grab the light. Okay, so that's what a sunspot or a freckle is. When I'm talking about harmonizing with outside, like being okay with this stuff, the person that you thought about that called you is probably someone you love, right? My mom, my mom's calling me, right? So as you get connected to things that you're connected to, if we're afraid of sunspots, we're afraid of the sun. Communication with it is going to be limited. Communication with the earth is going to be limited if you're not in harmony with it. The Gaian concept, there's a Harvard study that explains that, but it's essentially that the earth is a living organism. It's just a little bit different than how we would describe living, right? If you sleep too much, you're actually more tired. You sleep so much that you're like, why can't I get out of bed? Oh, I'm just going to sleep some more. Why can't I get out of bed? I'm going to sleep. Because it's not good for your body. Your body's not made for that. The same thing is for breathing. If we breathe too much, we are not getting oxygen into the body. So back to my performance, okay? I'll bring it up in a second. But remember why I'm talking about this. Because I was able to perform at a professional level without training. Does anyone kind of know what she's doing here? She's hyperventilating. What's the cure for hyperventilating? Breathe in a paper bag. So this never made sense to me as a kid, because in elementary school, I was born in '82, so in elementary school we still had paper bags. I don't know if they exist now, but it's like they keep on putting, if you need air, if you can't get oxygen into your body, how does breathing into a bag get more oxygen to the body? Because I'm like, isn't oxygen out here? How is reducing the amount of oxygen going to help you get oxygen into your body, right? So also taking a deep breath, hyperventilating is what? Your body's starving for air, so it's trying to breathe in more, it needs more oxygen, but it's not working. So you take away the oxygen, and the oxygen gets into the body. So it's a little bit of a paradox. It's actually defined the Bohr effect. And so what this is that it explains that CO2 builds up in our blood. And as CO2 builds up in our blood, the alkalinity of our blood reduces. And as the alkalinity starts getting more towards the acidic side, what that does is it stimulates our hemoglobin. It stimulates our hemoglobin to release oxygen. So hemoglobin, another word for that is red blood cell. Red blood cells go to the lungs and pick up oxygen. Our blood is mostly well oxygenated. What we need in order to get oxygen into our body is we need those red blood cells to release the oxygen. And those red blood cells release the oxygen when they start sensing that the blood is turning more acidic because of the increase of CO2, which means if we're breathing too much, CO2 is not building up, and those hemoglobins are not releasing the oxygen into our body. So the paradox is if you breathe less, you're more oxygen going into your cells. Now, how this helped me as an athlete and how it's going to help everyone here produce more power in your body, which then you will be able to transmit out into your reality, is that I went to school for psychology, so that's actually my degree. I have a minor in exercise science. But I knew the difference between sympathetic and parasympathetic. And when I was about to, 3, 2, 1, go, buzzer, about to compete, I would breathe through my nose and try to keep myself in the rest and digest nervous system, because I knew that if I started breathing out of my mouth really, really fast, my body was going to dump adrenaline. And so my mindset when I was competing was, it's like in that Fast and the Furious movie where they're racing and the person uses the nitric oxide too soon. I was trying to wait for my adrenaline dump as far as possible. When everybody else started falling off, my adrenaline would kick in, as opposed to it getting dumped right in the very beginning of the workout. So I knew that, but what I actually didn't know was that the fact that I was breathing less was actually bringing more oxygen into my body, which is power for the muscles. So this can be measured. We can measure how good we are at being adapted to CO2 building up. And we're all going to do it right now. So there's a Taoist practice, or a Taoist teaching, I guess. It says, first breathe so your neighbor cannot hear you. Then breathe so you cannot hear yourself. And then breathe so that you cannot even feel yourself breathing. So right now when you guys are breathing, just start breathing through your nose. And I'm just going to tell a story about, imagine if you're sitting in here and somebody walked in and went to go sit next to you and you could hear them breathing, maybe even breathing through the mouth, really labored, really effortful, they just came and walked in and that's how they're breathing, you would automatically assume that they are unhealthy, as opposed to somebody coming in calmly, sitting down, you don't hear them breathing. So the mouth breathers, that's a signal that their body is not adapted to CO2, which is going to make them not be able to take in oxygen. So their body's constantly drowning. Constant drowning. That's what that is when somebody walks up a flight of stairs. It's not necessarily their muscles can't handle it. It's just that they breathe so much their entire life that they've never learned to slow down so that the CO2 can build up and that the oxygen can transfer into their body. So we're going to do an exercise. I'm going to count. I'm pretty good at counting, right? I was a professional CrossFitter, so I lived and died by the clock. So I'm 1, 2, I'll count to about 25 seconds. What you're going to do, you don't have to start at 0. What you're going to do is we're going to breathe regularly, so we're not taking a big inhale. We're not doing this and then holding. We're just breathing regularly, and we're going to hold at the end of the exhale. And we're going to hold, it's not a max hold. We're going to hold to the first signal that your body is saying, like knocking on the door saying, hey, I need more air. So it's basically all the way till you're starting to get a little bit uncomfortable. So not a max breath hold. And then that's going to be a score, okay? It's also called control pause or BOLT score. BOLT means blood oxygen level test. So we're testing the blood oxygen level. So just to reiterate, we're breathing regularly now. Now, remember earlier I said breathe so that you cannot feel it? So through the nose, I want you to breathe so you can't even feel your nose hairs moving. So if you can breathe where you can't even feel your nose hairs breathing, then that's a way to work on this. So you guys can see that you're constantly going to be wanting is the wrong word to use, desiring more air when you're breathing that slow. If you can do that while walking your dog or driving, try to do it so you don't even feel your nose hairs breathe. Now you can go back to regular breathing, because regular breathing, you'll probably feel your nose hairs breathe or move. So do a couple breaths, and I'm going to tell you when to stop on the next exhale, and we're going to hold, and I'm going to just count, and you're going to get a rough estimate of where we're at, how long we can go without your body telling you it needs more air. So take like 2 more breaths, regular breaths, not deep, just regular breaths. And on the next one, just hold the exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. So if you guys took a big breath in after, then that was too long. Forgot to mention that. So if you had to recuperate, then you held too long. So you guys can average, okay? If you are below 10 seconds, you are not sleeping properly. You are not getting oxygen exchanged into your cells, okay? And you're going to sigh a lot. You're going to do that a lot throughout the day because that's your body saying, we're not getting enough oxygen. 10 to 20 seconds is classified as normal. However, 20 seconds and up is effective. All right, so you guys have an idea of where you're at. Most people are around 10 seconds on their first time, but it's really easy to increase the effectiveness of your body. As I said, if you guys are exercising, or you guys been to a yoga class, what are you doing? Do you know that each part of those postures is one breath, right? So when the teacher says inhale, exhale, and you're taking 3 inhales and exhales, by the time they're saying inhale, exhale down, inhale back up, inhale, exhale forward, try to stay on that. And you can even go slower than the teacher if you have your own practice. But also, like I said, try to breathe throughout the day without your nose hairs moving. And another thing, if you're walking your dog, what we just did, holding your breath on the exhale, just do that. If you're taking a walk, keep on saying walking the dog because that's my experience of walking is walking our dog solar. But if you don't have a solar, then you're just walking. Try to just hold that breath. You also, during exercise, can do the same thing. You can do runs on the beach, holding your breath, to increase your blood oxygen level.
Do you hold on the inhale or the exhale?
You hold on the exhale. So you guys know about Wim Hof and holotropic breath, and that's a lot of breathing a lot. So with athletes especially, and even just for general health, learning to do more with less is actually where the magic's at. As I explained with the Bohr effect. And there's charts. The charts I was going to put a picture of, it literally just, it's, a lot of this is kind of, it just seemed meaningless to me because I was like, this is super confusing, and I'll just explain it with words. Humming. So humming or chanting naturally extends that breath. So if you guys imagine the Om, right? Like you're extending that out. And humming increases nitric oxide in the body 15% compared to quiet exhalation, according to this study. Humming greatly increases nasal nitric oxide 15-fold. So it's basically saying that vibrating airflow causes dramatic increase in gas exchange. Nitric oxide is basically the widening of blood vessels. Wider blood vessels help delivery of nutrients and oxygen. Vasodilation is what Viagra does. So it basically increases blood flow. Mentioning that because that's another side effect of knowing this. So humming, the way that they actually tested this was with the yoga practice called Brahmari, which is bee breath. Some of you may know that, where you just close your ears, cover your eyes. I don't know if they did it to this extent, and then you just, you're just humming. But also, chanting in general creates a vibrational nature. It's just this study was just done on humming. We can't study everything, so they're like having a little bit of flexibility of whether we just believe in science and nothing in the study I'm not going to take in. We can experiment with it. I have a practical usage for it. Air. I asked earlier like what we were taught about melanin. We're also taught that within air is chemical components or molecules, oxygen, O2 being one of them. And so in the East, and actually in the English word for spirit actually means breath, inspire, okay? So along with air is this other thing that here we call it spirit. Other places in the world they call it prana or chi, which translates to life force. Okay, so how do we get more of this? Same thing, you breathe less. So my wife, Caro, and I were in a small room with like 10 people, smaller than this, with Mantak Chia a few years ago, and we were talking about stem cell regeneration. And he taught us bone breathing. I think we can do it right now. So bone breathing, so what he said is the less we breathe out of our mouth and nose, the more prana that we can get into the other gates of the body. So the mouth and the nose is a gate that we take in air or prana. But prana doesn't, the air is a vehicle for prana, but it doesn't necessarily only come in through these physical openings. It can go through your skin. There's not a barrier for prana there. So bone breathing, if you guys just put your hands on your knees and pay attention to the tips of your fingers. Okay, so the way that the prana comes into your body is it spirals in the tips of your fingers, and it spirals up your bones, and then it gets packed into the bone marrow in your arm bones. So the way that we're going to do this is we're going to breathe less. So we can go similar to Ujjayi breath, but we're going to restrict the inhale. So it'll sound like, so it's almost like you're creating a vacuum, a suction with your inhale. And as you create that suction, feel prana spiraling in through the tips of your fingers. And then you just exhale out. Then you inhale in, feeling it spiral up the tips of your fingers. Exhale out. We'll do one more. Exhale out. Same thing with your toes now. Inhale, feel the tips of your toes. See if restricting the air allows you to vacuum in prana through the tips of your toes, the bottom of your feet as well. Up, spiraling into your femurs. Do one more inhale. Hold the inhale. Flex all the muscles in your arms and legs, and that's packing, condensing in that prana, that chi, into your bones. And then exhale. So that was just a little demonstration, right? So that's just, some of you may have felt that, some of you may not have felt it. Can I get a raise of hands of people that felt something? All right, that was most everybody. Crazy stuff, right? So how, like, you see, like, I own gyms. I'm like, no, diet and exercise is the way to get stronger. And I start discovering all this other stuff. So bone breathing was just more evidence, I guess I would say, on how breathing less actually helps you produce more power. Water, basic functions, it's a conductor in our body. It helps with so much of the functions and transmitting of information, detoxification, digestion in our body. But I'm here to talk about one more important thing, which is what water does inside of our body, and it's doing it all over the earth as well. The fourth phase of water, Gerald Pollack. So this is from his textbook. And it's an amazing textbook. It should be taught in school. And it's a really easy textbook to read if you guys get it. I suggest also listening to it on Audible because there's a lot of diagrams like this. And it's cool to listen to it being explained and then also seeing the diagram. But essentially what happens in the fourth phase of water is he's defined another phase of water. And he wasn't the first one to do this. The Soviets were coming up with this in the 60s, but back to science and politics, the Americans and the Soviets were always at war with something. Who can get a manned rocket into the Earth orbit first? And they came up with this concept called polyphasic water, which sounds really similar to fourth phase of water. Polyphasic means that there's different phases of water in your cell, I almost said glass, but let's just talk about our cell, our glass body. Water separates itself into different phases. So this phase, there's one right here, this is a liquid crystalline phase. Meaning over here is what's called free water. It's just water as we would normally think about water. You put your hand in it, it just moves around your hand. You just think it's just H2O moving around other H2O molecules. But what actually happens is it arranges itself into millions of layers of sheets that are all hexagonally shaped. And because it arranges itself out of the traditional H2O structure that we know, it arranges itself into hydrogen sheets. That charge is a little bit different. It's actually got a negative charge. And this is called EZ because this means exclusion zone. It excludes, it detoxes, it purifies. So you guys all know this. If you guys put a toothpick on a glass of water, and there's that skin. So that's just traditionally known as surface tension. But really what that is millions of layers of hydrogen and oxygen that has arranged itself into a crystal, and it's stiffer. It's stiffer on the surface. The ocean actually goes even deeper. But basically, the more water, the bigger this is. What that does is it creates a negative and positive portion of the water, which there's something called a potato clock battery. So you can plug, potato clock? Yeah, so you can plug this into water and create enough power to generate a clock. Our body is a battery. So when I was 17, I worked at the second largest air-filled dome in the world. And the first largest was the Silver Dome, which was also in my same city. And one of my jobs was, it was used as a golf dome. It's called Oakland Yard, OYA, Oakland Yard Athletics. So at OYA, I would have to make sure the golf cart that picked up the golf balls was charged. And every so often, I would have to take the batteries open and put water in it. And what I was doing was giving that water a medium for electrolytes. And so batteries, if you look at it, it has a negative and positive poles, right? And so what's happening in the waters in our body is that they're all batteries. Okay, so negative, positive, there's a difference in voltage which allows for a charge to build. Now the important thing here is that EZ, this zone, grows with light. So the more light, particularly infrared light, that goes on the water, the greater this negative charge is going to grow, which is going to equal more power in your body. Literally, more power in your body. Blue light also increases the amount of electrolytes. But back to nature, being outdoors, producing power. You guys will be more powerful beings if you're outside. There's so much happening. I've gone over just a few, what I can present in 90 minutes. And the answer, or the question always gets asked, well, what type of water, you know? All of this, I could just keep on naming, spring water, distilled water, all the different types. The answer that I have is I don't know, particularly. So I don't know. What I do know, though, is that go into the sun, all right? Because you want that process happening. Ether. Ether, ether, ether. So ether is something, if we look at the etymology of it, it's upper air, bright, purer air. Okay, and what it's known to be akasha is also has the same sort of word as ether, open space, vacuity, and sky, atmosphere. I was going to get into that gender stuff, but I'll skip that. It'll come up later. So ether was basically disproven by this experiment, Michelson and Morley. And the Michelson and Morley experiment was explaining this luminiferous ether. And what they determined the ether was what light travels on. So if a sound wave travels in air, then what is the light wave traveling on? And there was this concept, luminiferous ether, that they proposed. And Michelson and Morley basically went to go test it 1 week. It was like they had to wait for the planets and the sun, and they were measuring the light. And they basically, with an interferometer, is that how you say it? I'll get to it. I think it's an interferometer. But where's my next slide? All right, so this, Michelson and Morley, this guy, Dayton Miller. So Dayton Miller proved the ether. And it was about 30 years later. And Dayton Miller ran his test over 200 readings, 12,000 individual turns of the interferometer. I knew how I was saying it was wrong. And it was over the course of basically 20 years. All right, Mickelson and Morley did it over the course of 1 week, 4 days right here. 6 hours of data was collected. 4 days, 36 turns, compared to 200,000 readings, 12,000 turns over the course of 24 years, and in different environments. So when I mentioned earlier that scientists are all arguing with each other, this was in direct competition with Einstein's theory of relativity, which is the favorite. So he went to many debates, and even Mickelson and Morley didn't disprove that there was an ether. It just wasn't statistically significant. So basically what I'm saying is that there's science to definitely discredit the ether. There's committees that came and discredited Dayton, but we know even nowadays that's still happening. Just look at the last few years and the arguments and what gets pushed out as accepted fact. Quintessence, I had this in the wrong place, but quintessence is the fifth essence is what quintessence means. When we think about the word quintessence, we're thinking about perfection. But it is essentially the fifth essence. It's assuming the ether. It's suggesting the ether. So Nikola Tesla. Mankind recognized that all perceptible matter comes from a primary substance, a tenuity beyond conception filling all space, or the akasha, or luminiferous ether. So basically, look at right here, life-giving prana or creative force, calling into existence the never-ending cycles, all things and phenomenon, come from this primary substance. I spoke about light, earth, air, water. Getting familiar with what the origin of all of that is going to allow you to also increase power within this reality. This is Krishna right here. My material energy, the Akash, or ether, was created. From ether, the air. From air, fire. From fire, water. From water, earth. From earth, plants. Plants, food. And from food, man. So man is the food essence of the makeup of all of the elements which come from the ether, the Akash. So the ether is the source. This is Kabbalah. At the top, Keter. And I had other slides that I took out of this, but another way to define Keter is Kether. And if you just take off the K, you have ether. But it also has similar definitions of what it does. It basically supports the human being. So this is Max Born. Werner Heisenberg and Max Born essentially Max Born got a Nobel Prize for his contributions to quantum physics. They were like the fathers of quantum physics. And they called what we know ether, they called it apeiron. Apeiron. So apeiron, Greek word that means unlimited, boundless, infinite, indefinite, without end. And when you start getting into this, it's everywhere, the Tao, the Tao. And you start looking at this symbol is something that you guys all know of, right? This is the most famous Taoist symbol. It's the yin yang. It's basically talking about how everything is both male and female, life and death, light and dark. And you see similarities with ether. This is the Kabbalion. And Hermes wrote this, and all of these principles also really get into this non-dual nature. All is mind, the universe is mental. But essentially what I'm doing is now transitioning over to everything is consciousness. And the ether is the consciousness that emerges the elements, and from the elements emerges plants and animals and us. and beyond. And this is that CIA document that talks about torsion fields. Well, it talks about the torus and how the universe is constructed. This is the gateway document from the CIA that talks about analysis and assessment of the gateway process, which talks about astral projection, which it's like, okay, if we're projecting into other dimensions, what are those dimensions in? Like, what's making them up? Because in this dimension, we have this, quote, physical space. Are we able to go somewhere else? Torsion fields. I just want to mention this because this changed my reality, because torsion fields are a toroid is spinning. So there's a way to measure spinning activity in the universe. So like, think about a star. A torsion field detector can detect the star without detecting the light. It can detect the star now. So it doesn't have to wait for the light to come here. It can detect the spinning frequency of the star. And so a torsion field detector will see a star here, and that's where it currently is. That's where the main signal of the torsion field is going to be. However, it can also, what we're seeing with the light, let's say the star is going to be here, right? Because let's say it's 200,000 light years away. We're seeing the light from 200,000 light years away, but the star moved. So we can see torsion fields instantaneously. We don't have to see light. The crazy thing is that these torsion field detectors, you'll see the star where it is now. The torsion field is strongest there. You see into the past. It gets weaker, 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 weaker to where we see the light, but also torsion fields can detect into the future. Weaker, 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 weaker. So there's fields of energy that transcend our concept of time and space, and which we are. We are limited here. It's called a Maya or a veil. We're limited here, and we experience linear time. However, there's many studies that show that our body connects beyond time. There's precognition studies. They hook people up, and there's even, I'm going to keep on going but the precognition studies, they show people images of like death and destruction or harmony, and they can actually see that the heart knows what the machine is going to generate before it even generates it. There's also random machine generators all over this earth that start going chaotic around significant events like 9/11. So for the day 9/11 happened, 24 hours before, you see these random machine generators are going nuts because the emotion is essentially a torsion field. It's the guy, he's a Soviet guy too. The guy that invented or discovered, I should say, torsion fields, Kraskarov, I believe is his name, Kirkorov, something like that. I don't think it's in this study, but he discovered when he was cutting his plants that they were producing torsion fields. Somebody in shock produces a torsion field. So our emotions travel instantaneously. We're connected to the other side of the universe through this torsion field, this ether. If you look into morphic field, is another thing that maps this all out by Rupert Sheldrake. And corporeal means without body. So I want to end here, and then we're going to do probably some more vibration. But this is about how everything is consciousness, because I'm mentioning ether. All right? So in the teachings of Ra, which is not me, okay? Ra is short for Ronald, and I went by Ronnie my whole life. And then I got assigned a spiritual name, which was Ravi. And so Ra is just a shortened version of those three names. So, and it just happened that way. And so Ra, which we know of from Egypt, he has been channeled by scientists. We're talking about engineering professors at a university used a person to channel eventually Ra, but they channeled other beings. But they channeled Ra, and Ra explains densities of being. It can be translated to dimensions, but he uses densities. And what he means by densities is that right now we're in the third density. We're in an individual body. but there's also part of us in a higher density. So it's not like a separate place. It's just another state of being where we have access to more of us. So the first density are the elements: water, fire, air, and earth. From them, basically from the ether, comes water, fire, air, and earth. And these elements make themselves into the second density, which is aware animals and plants. Plants and animals are aware. A plant, a tree, turns its leaves towards the sun. It's aware. An animal eats. It's aware. We are self-aware. So we do things to prevent ourselves from getting killed. We do things to position ourselves in a more attractive state to find a partner. We are self-aware. We're aware of ourselves in relationship to others. We're in the third density. Beyond us is the fourth density, where we are now not just aware of ourselves, but we're aware of others. And what that looks like is called empathic. We can feel other people's feelings. And that's the next density of us traveling through this. And it's a state of awareness. The next density after that is we're aware of the thoughts of others. So that would mean that I wouldn't need to be up here speaking to you if we were in fifth density, because you guys would all know everything that I know. And so the point of us being where we are now is so that we can increase our power and have the experiences as a third density. But he calls it distortions. He calls time and space essentially a distortion of the unity of everything. And Ra is a sixth density being. So if we have all the experiences possible as third density to make us our own experience, then we share the feelings of it with everybody. And then we know the wisdom of it with everybody as a collection of humans on this planet. We will then also start in sixth density, or in fifth density, sixth density, we start being able to travel through time as well. Well, sixth density is traveling through time because you don't need individual bodies anymore. So if you don't have individual bodies, that gives you the ability to travel through time. And he doesn't know much about seventh density because he's a sixth density being. And eighth density, it all starts over again. So it's like an octave. But I say this because there's so much more attached to us through the ether, through this non-physical, non-corporeal stuff that's around us that we're told doesn't exist. There's ways to access power of stars on the other, if the universe is even a thing. It could be on the other side of the video game, but there's ways to take in that information. So even going outside at night where our local star is down, and now you're getting the information from everywhere else. And this is a Japanese word, yugen. It essentially means that you find beauty in not knowing. Okay, so this all seems like reaching to find out the answer, but it really just opens up more questions. And not being stressed about not knowing, it just allows us to be in harmony with the wonder. You're not a drop in the ocean, you're the entire ocean in a drop. All right, so because we're an antenna here, us being in alignment allows this nature, these powers that I'm talking about to come in. If we're sailing through these elements, but our sails are broken, we have, my dad called me an idiot, so I don't want to take direction from anybody, or anybody that's standing up in a microphone I'm scared of and I'm resistant to listen to because my dad called me an idiot. If we have all this stuff going on in these programs, then our sails have holes and we're unable to take in the winds and the flow of the waters of nature. And so what I've discovered, I mentioned gyms, winning out there. I mentioned closing my business, still being able to somehow live at houses at the top of the Hollywood Hills, Air One, like money, like that's all a program as well. So I was talking about this in the context of my experience with the gyms, but also in just the context of that word manifestation. Our power within this non-physical reality relies on us being in alignment. So if what our head is telling us, our thoughts, are not in alignment with what we feel, then we will be fighting internally with ourselves. There's no way you going outside is really going to do much, okay? Because the tree is completely happy being ugly. If you're looking in the mirror and like you're unable to commit to that connection if you're not in harmony with yourself. Thoughts, feelings, actions, processing of nutrition, the gut, with a lot of our consciousness is there. There's more bacteria in our body than human cells. And so psychophysiological coherence essentially means the more in alignment we are, the more coherent we are, the more we can impact the fields of reality. And that looks like manifestation. And we're all manifesting right now, but we actually start to realize it. I was just in the parking garage and like within minutes manifested like 3 things. One of them was the plug into my electric EMF producing vehicle wasn't working. And then a lady came up and was like, "I'm trapped. Everyone trapped me in. Can you move your car out?" And I took her space and it also didn't work. So I need to manifest, we have to be more specific. I need to manifest a working charger next time. But yeah, the technology of reality really opens up if we are in alignment. There's 80 to 100 billion neurons in the head brain. The heart has about 40,000. The gut has 100 million. So about 1% in the gut. That's significant.